Imagine you are a competent doctor, respected by your colleagues, but you decide to wear a simple lab coat on an ordinary day. Suddenly, an arrogant surgeon who doesn't know you publicly humiliates you, treating you as if you are someone of no importance, never realizing that you are, in fact, the medical director of the hospital. What would you do? How would you react to this embarrassment in front of everyone? This is the story of Lívia Santana, who turned a situation of public humiliation into a powerful moment of revelation and justice. Want to know how she did it? Subscribe, like, and leave a comment below telling us what you would do in this situation. I have always liked walking through the hospital corridors in my simple white lab coat. That hospital had become my second home over the years, and as the medical director, it was common for everyone to know who I was. However, there was something pleasing about keeping a low profile. Avoiding the ostentation of my title allowed me to observe people's behavior without them knowing exactly who was there. That morning, a distant murmur and the sound of hurried shoes against the floor echoed through the corridors as I walked. Nurses rushed back and forth, patients anxiously awaited answers, and the medical staff, like me, was focused on another day of work. I carried with me the same determination as always, to be efficient, to save lives, to guide my team with serenity. I felt the weight of the looks as always. Not everyone knew who I was. Even with years of experience and the position I had earned, the feeling of being underestimated was still a constant companion. Some looks were curious, others strange, especially from new employees. Those looks spoke more than words ever could. For some, it was unthinkable that a black woman could lead one of the largest hospitals in the city. For others, I was just another nurse. And to be honest, I didn't blame them for that because I didn't wear prominent badges or flaunt my position with ostentatious pride. I entered the nursing station to review some reports before preparing for the day's surgery. I was focused, concentrating on every detail of the records. Being the medical director was not just about coordinating and delegating. I enjoyed being present, being part of the surgeries, feeling the responsibility directly in my hands. I knew that this was not common for someone in a leadership position like mine, but I never wanted to distance myself from what I loved to do. The practice of medicine, the contact with patients, the quick decisions that could save lives. That was part of who I was. As I typed notes on the computer, a voice interrupted my train of thought. "You, nurse?" A harsh, authoritative voice sounded behind me. I slowly lifted my gaze, encountering a tall man with severe features and impatient eyes. He was wearing a pristine white lab coat, a stethoscope hanging around his neck. He was a surgeon I didn't know yet, probably new to the hospital. His posture suggested that he considered himself the center of attention. I watched him for a few seconds, hoping he would realize he was interrupting me, but he seemed unconcerned. "I'm talking to you. I need the test results for patient 204, now. What are you doing just standing there?" He said as if I were there only to serve him, his voice filled with disdain. I took a deep breath, maintaining my calm. This happened more often than I would like to admit. Some people, like him, did not bother to get to know who was around them before barking orders. For them, someone like me, a black woman wearing a lab coat without special identification, could only be part of the nursing staff, subordinate to them, never someone of authority. "I'm reviewing some reports before the surgery," I replied politely but directly, trying to maintain my composure, not letting the impatience rising inside me take over. But he wasn't interested in listening. Before I could finish my sentence, he shook his head in disapproval and interrupted. "Reports? Leave that to the doctors, please. We need action, not paperwork. Go get the tests now. I won't repeat myself." I felt a heat rising through my body, but I kept my expression neutral. This was not the first time I had been underestimated or spoken to with disdain. There was an unspoken expectation that I would react, that I would assert myself, that I would tell him who I really was. But at that moment I chose not to do so. I observed his arrogant posture, the way he spoke as if he owned everything around him. He probably thought his behavior was justified. Maybe, for him, a black woman there could only be in a subordinate position. This was not a rare sight in our society, especially in such a traditional environment as the hospital. He firmly believed he was superior, and that was clear in every word and gesture. "Dr. Brandeo, right?" I asked, vaguely remembering his name from recent administrative meetings. He had been hired recently, and his reputation as a competent but difficult surgeon preceded him. He looked at me suspiciously, as if it were absurd that I knew his name. "Yes, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you do your job." He almost spat the words, impatient. The hospital seemed quieter now, although I knew many who were nearby were probably listening to the exchange. Still, there were no visible reactions, just discreet sidelong glances. It was clear that this situation was putting me in the spotlight in an uncomfortable way, but I refused to look down. I knew that Rosa, the head nurse, was nearby, just observing, but she was well aware of my stance in situations like that. There was a silent understanding between us, built over the years. Rosa knew I didn't need immediate help, even when the situation became tense. But I could feel the discomfort in the air. The embarrassment of being underestimated, treated with disdain, was palpable. And worse, it was something I was used to. Dr. Arthur Brandeo, impatient, crossed his arms, waiting for me to react according to his expectations, like an obedient nurse who would run to fulfill his order. With every second I took to move, I saw his impatience growing. "What are you waiting for? Do you need a formal invitation to do your job?" He insisted, his voice rising to an almost aggressive tone. The way he spoke to me as if I were inferior was suffocating. I felt each word land like a blow. But still I remained calm. I knew who I was, and I knew my dignity could not be so easily taken away. "Dr. Brandeo, I am reviewing important information for the surgery. These reports are essential for the procedure." My voice came out firm but controlled. I was not willing to bow to his prejudice. He let out a short laugh as if he were facing a great joke. "Reports? Once again, leave that to the doctors. You nurses sometimes think you are doctors, don't you?" Those words reverberated within me. They carried more than just arrogance. There was racism there. There was a deep-seated prejudice in his assumptions about me. He knew nothing about me, yet he had already decided that I was not worthy of being taken seriously. The silence in the nursing station intensified. The embarrassment was almost tangible now as everyone awaited my reaction. And it was at that moment that I realized this situation was not just about me. It was about all the black women who had ever been underestimated, treated with disdain, or humiliated by someone like him. My heart raced, but I knew I had to choose my words carefully. It was a matter of dignity, of self-respect. I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. I knew there was a far more effective way to handle this situation. I looked Dr. Arthur directly in the eyes, refusing to look down, and decided it was time to put an end to this. "Dr. Brandeo," I began, keeping my voice calm yet firm, "my name is Lívia Santana. I am the medical director of this hospital." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Dr. Brandeo froze. I could see in his eyes the moment the words finally made sense to him. He blinked a few times as if trying to process the information. His face, which had previously been filled with arrogance and impatience, now looked pale and surprised. "Medical director?" He repeated, as if it were impossible for him to believe what he had just heard. I continued to look directly at him without averting my gaze. I could feel the weight of the reactions around us. Every look, every held breath bore witness to Dr. Brandeo's discomfort as he realized he had made a colossal mistake. The silence lingered as if the air around us was charged with electric tension. All eyes were on us, and I could feel the weight of the moment. A moment that reflected not only my struggle but also the struggles of so many others who faced discrimination and disdain. Dr. Brandeo finally began to compose himself. He straightened his shoulders, but there was a hint of nervousness in his posture. I could see the embarrassment mixed with his arrogance, and that gave me a sense of comfort. It was the first time I had seen him hesitate. "I didn't know," he stammered, his voice now a bit lower. The commanding tone had disappeared, replaced by a mix of disbelief and discomfort. "Yes, I can see that," I replied with a hint of irony. "It's easy to forget that there's more to someone than their appearance, isn't it?" Looking at my colleagues, I saw expressions of shock and relief. Rosa, the head nurse, was there with a slight smile of satisfaction. She had always believed in the importance of recognizing each team member's value, regardless of color or gender. The dynamic in the room had changed. I was no longer alone. I was surrounded by people who believed in dignity and respect, even if they still felt a bit intimidated by Dr. Brandeo's presence. "I'm sorry, Lívia," he finally said, but his voice lacked the sincerity I had hoped for. He was apologizing because the situation left no room for his arrogance anymore. "You don't need to apologize to me, Dr. Brandeo," I replied, deciding it wasn't worth my time to engage in a hollow apology. "You need to learn to treat people with respect, regardless of who you think they are." The murmurs of approval in the room grew. Other team members began to gather around, and I could feel a newfound sense of solidarity among us. That situation had transformed into a collective moment, a demonstration of support and unity against discrimination. Dr. Brandeo seemed to realize that his power over the situation had vanished. He tried to regain his composure, but the mask of authority had already cracked. "All right, let's forget this," he said, trying to change the subject. "We need to focus on the surgery." "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice steady, but now feeling a renewed sense of strength. "Let's focus, but I hope that from now on, you learn to see beyond what your eyes show you. This lesson could be vital in medicine and in life." He nodded, though his gaze had lost its previous confidence. What had once been a hostile encounter had now transformed into a dialogue that challenged his assumptions. I had managed not only to assert myself but also to create space for others to feel safe expressing their discontent. We were filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation as we made our way to the surgery room. The atmosphere was fraught with nerves and anticipation. A new understanding was reached among the crew, despite the fact that the situation was quite heated. First thing I did when I entered the operating room was make sure that everyone was in the same position and focused on what they were doing. I proceeded to say, "Everyone, let's work together and make sure that this procedure is a success, while retaining a serious manner." The difficulty I had encountered previously had not been resolved. Rather, it had adopted a different shape. Now, I was resolved to demonstrate that my stance was valid and that my knowledge and talents spoke louder than any bias I could meet. I was determined to show that my perspective was authentic. Dr. Brandeo, who was standing next to me, continued to exhibit a sense of unease. During the beginning of the operation, I was directing the crew, and I noted that he was hesitant to disagree with my commands. His self-assurance had been shaken as a result of the sentences that we had spoken earlier. My expectation was that this fissure would become even more pronounced, and that confronting prejudice would not only be a personal triumph, but also a step toward altering the power relations that exist within the hospital. There was a noticeable decrease in the level of anxiety in the room as the operation continued. In the beginning, Dr. Brandeo exhibited a greater level of respect, willingly accepting my advice without any resistance. My instructions were followed with greater attention by him, and gradually, the tension that had been building up between us began to evaporate. However, I was aware that the battle against prejudice was not yet even close to being won. At a crucial point in the operation, when everything appeared to be going according to plan, one of the aides made the mistake of dropping a surgical instrument on the floor. In the normally quiet space, the sound reverberated. Everyone's attention was focused on Dr. Brandeo, who was in the position of leadership. In spite of the fact that I anticipated him to behave in a professional manner, he appeared to be apprehensive. When I finally broke the stillness, I stated, "You can pick it up," without any hesitation. "Let's move on." I was aware that my statements were not just intended for Dr. Brandeo, but also for everyone else present in the room as the team was observing. In other words, it was a confirmation that everyone, regardless of who they were, had equal responsibility for the accomplishment of the procedure. While I was looking at each member of the team, I encouraged them to keep working together and to keep going. The surgical procedure continued, and as we made progress, the team's ability to work together became even more effective. Despite the fact that the atmosphere became more harmonic, the humiliation that I had endured earlier continued to cast a shadow over me. However, the act of Dr. Brandeo underestimating me is not something that can be easily forgotten. What bothered me the most was the possibility that other people might still be going through situations that were comparable to mine. Dr. Brandeo approached me after the conclusion of the surgical procedure, displaying an attitude that appeared to be a combination of respect and sadness. He expressed his sincerity by saying, "Lívia, I am sorry for how I behaved," looking sincere. "Please accept my gratitude, but I am not only a nurse, Dr. Brandeo." My response was to remind you of that in your future interactions, and I did it while maintaining a hard look. My goal was for him to comprehend that it was not only about me, but also about everyone else who he may possibly underestimate. "Yes, you are correct," he conceded, his tone becoming more subdued. "I will work on that." I had a sense of a minor win, but there was still a significant distance to travel. I was aware that change would not occur immediately, but I recognized that every step was important. Even though he wasn't the only one who needed to learn something, it was a good beginning. Following our departure from the operating room, the atmosphere became more relaxed. There was a lot of excitement among the staff as they talked about how well the process went. While I was watching the expressions of happiness and relief on their faces, I allowed myself to grin. At that precise instant, I came to the realization that my struggle was not only for myself, but also for everyone else in my immediate environment. I was willing to be an active participant in the process of change that was beginning to have an effect on the situation. This was a chance for me to establish a place in the environment that I had always cherished that was characterized by equality and respect for all. A week later, Dr. Brandeo approached me to have a conversation about the events that had transpired. He appeared to be more receptive and willing to listen. During our talk, we noticed that he was showing signs of maybe beginning to transform. "Lívia, I am interested in taking action regarding the events that have transpired. Would it be possible for you to assist me in organizing a session for the team that focuses on diversity and inclusion?" In his eyes, there was a hint of earnestness when he asked the question. Initially, I was taken aback, but I soon recognized this as a significant opportunity. Indeed, not only for myself but for each and every person who works in the hospital. Everyone would be able to talk about their experiences and learn to appreciate the unique qualities that each person possesses. As I responded to Dr. Brandeo, I expressed my belief that it was an excellent concept, and I had the impression that we were actually beginning to open doors for big change. "Let's do this together." We started making plans for the session with Rosa and the other members of the team offering their assistance. The first meeting would be devoted to discussing microaggressions and the ways in which they might be avoided in everyday life. It was quite exciting for me because I would be able to talk about my experience and inspire other people to talk about their own experiences. Every tale that is shared has the potential to have a significant impact, and it may even be able to alter the mentality of individuals who had not yet realized the significance of respecting one another. These days were filled with a lot of activity. The session was a huge success, drawing in a greater number of attendees than we had anticipated. The narratives that were shared during the meetings by co-workers who had been through circumstances that were comparable to mine were intensely emotional and illuminating. The voices that had been stifled in the past were now being heard, and it was a beautiful thing to be able to make this observation. Alterations started to take place in the ambience of the hospital gradually. As the frequency of conversations concerning diversity and inclusion increased, I came to the realization that it was not only Dr. Brandeo who was the recipient of education. One thing that gave me optimism was the fact that other medical professionals, including nurses and doctors, began to talk about their own preconceptions and views. It was over time that the culture of the hospital started to undergo a transformation. The principles of respect and dignity emerged as the focal point of our interactions with one another. In his pursuit to promote diversity, Dr. Brandeo became a zealous advocate, actively advocating new programs that tried to create an environment that was inclusive. Being a part of this transformation made me feel proud. The feeling of belonging and respect became stronger with each new workshop that was held and with each conversation that took place on the premises. As the team progressed, they came to realize that true power was not only derived from technical expertise, but also from the capacity to respect and embrace one another. Following the conclusion of one of the courses, Dr. Brandeo reached out to me for a confidential conversation on a certain day. With a sincere smile on his face, he expressed his gratitude to Lívia, saying, "I wanted to thank you for everything. You not only changed my perspective, but you're also helping to transform the culture of this hospital." I smiled back at him and responded, "Change is a joint effort, Dr. Brandeo," as I returned his smile. "But I'm glad you're willing to listen and learn." His remarks had a profound effect on me. Despite the fact that there was still a lot of work to be done, the battle that had started with a public humiliation had now evolved into a movement toward equality. Even though I was aware that I would continue to face difficulties, there was still a glimmer of optimism that subsequent generations of healthcare workers would not have to go through what I had gone through. I felt more confident in my personal life as a result of the new environment that I was experiencing at work. Through my participation in events and presentations, I started to share my expertise with populations that were not affiliated with the hospital. When I had the chance to talk about discrimination and empowerment, I felt like I was getting stronger and more capable of making a difference from each speaking opportunity. When it came to my emotional recovery, the assistance that I received from the team was really essential. It was through in-depth conversations with Rosa and other co-workers that I came to the realization that the fight was not simply an individual one but rather a community one. The struggle against injustice was a fight that each of us had a part to play, and when we worked together we were more powerful. The events that we went through together served as a driving force behind transformation not only in our professional lives but also in our personal lives for the better. I started making connections with other people who had been through experiences that were like to mine, which resulted in the formation of a support network that assisted me in coping with the pain and unfairness that I was experiencing. Throughout the course of the year, the workshop on diversity and inclusion became an integral component of the hospital's regularly scheduled events. It was evidence that communication and education had the potential to bring about tremendous change. When I looked around, I always felt excited to see so many individuals who were motivated to learn and progress. The room was always filling up. Not only did I tell my experience during each new session, but I also took the time to listen to the stories of other people. Every story, every laugh, and every tear that we all shed together served as a reminder that we were all fighting this battle together. One could feel the sensation of unity that pervaded the room, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the burden of discrimination was being lifted. Furthermore, what began as a reaction to humiliation evolved into a movement of solidarity over the course of time. Our connections grew stronger, and I became aware that I would never again be by myself. No matter what happens, we can't let discrimination silence us, I always remarked at the close of each session. I was always sure to convey this message. An enthusiastic round of applause was the team's response, which served as a powerful confirmation that change was feasible. On the other hand, I was aware that the conflict was not merely a one-time occurrence but rather a commitment that was ongoing. Both racism and prejudice had not been completely abolished, and there was still a great deal of work to be done. There will never be a day when there were no new difficulties or new wars to wage. As I sat there and thought about all that had transpired, I came to the realization that each and every one of us had an important part to play. The willingness to speak up, to confront the existing quo, and to support one another in our difficulties is the most important step toward bringing about change. As I was getting ready for another workshop session, I looked around the room and noticed the faces that were gathering there. Every single one of them was an essential component of a movement that was only getting started. The struggle against racism and prejudice was, and would continue to be, a collective endeavor, and it grew more and more apparent with each stride that we took toward conquering these issues. I could hear myself murmuring to myself, "Let's move forward," and I was filled with determination. We are just getting started. And so, like a flame that burns without ceasing, I continued to struggle for a more just future, a future in which everyone, regardless of their race or background, would be able to be seen and heard. There was the potential for change, and I was willing to get involved in it.